to another edition of Talking Music, Talking Drums. I'm your host, Ken Marino, and we're here today looking a little bit at the work of David Garibaldi. The opening track is Escape from Oakland. It's from his book, The Funky Beat, which highlights a myriad of Tower of Power grooves. Tower of Power is a group that he's played with. He played with them throughout the 70s, and they still tour today pretty frequently. You can see them throughout the metropolitan area, and they travel all over the world. This is really an interesting approach to drumming that David Garibaldi has, because with the Tower of Power, he was able to bring together a lot of different influences: rock, jazz, funk, Afro-Cuban, all mixed in there. One of the things about him is that he's left-handed, and he plays the kit cross with a righty grip. So many times a lot of his grooves will do things like switching from a left-handed lead to a right-handed lead, or he'll do other things that might be a little bit uncomfortable for a right-handed player to think about doing. So one of the things that he'll do is just, if you take a paradiddle, changes the groove from a right hand on the downbeat to a left hand on the downbeat. So it changes it kind of from a right-handed focus to a left-handed focus. So if you could mix up a myriad of paradiddles, you get this change: right, left, right, left, right, left. And this is something that he uses a lot throughout the kit that you'll see on this track from The Funky Beat, Escape from Oakland. It starts out with a really interesting groove, because one of the things we're dealing with is different ways of using the snare drum. When we look at a snare drum, you might think, oh, it's a snare drum, you play it. But the snare drum is, well, probably our most important instrument, because it's playing the backbeat. Between the bass and the snare drum and the hi-hat, we're doing most of our work creating the grooves. Even if you're using double bass, and you got two basses, snare drum and a hi-hat, you're still in this area a lot of times doing most of the work. And the snare drum is a really nuanced instrument. You can get everything from your cross stick that has a various number of sounds to a accented rim shot to a backbeat, ghost notes, accented syncopated notes. And all this is going on in here. You have accented notes, you have accented syncopated notes, you have your ghost notes as well. He actually wrote this for two hi-hats, so a lot of the hi-hat work that he does when he demonstrates this is here. So the open hi-hat happens here, and it's a lot easier to play some of these grooves if you're doing this kind of an open-handed playing thing where you have this whole open area. One of the challenges, of course, is when you start using a lot of accented and unaccented notes, is not hitting the stick. And so really you need to refine your technique to make that happen. So if we're talking about the fundamental snare drum technique, I could do this on the pad. The fundamental snare drum technique is based on a rebound. Down and a rebound. And what you have happening here is just the elements of physics. You have gravity and resistance. Gravity and resistance. If it wasn't for gravity and resistance, the stick would never stop. It would fly through space. But while using those physical properties, we're not working against them. We're working with nature. There are two different types of rebound strokes that we can use. There are various number of types, but the two fundamentals are called a full stroke, sometimes called a free stroke. But the full stroke, the full position, that you could use for an accented note, and then your tapped position that you can use for an unaccented note, for your ghost notes. Now, the closer you get to the ghost notes of the snare drum, the better off you are. The ghost notes should only be between an inch or two from the snare drum. They're very light notes. So when you hear them on the snare drum, they sound like this. And they actually blend in very well with your hi-hat. And then you have your backbeat, which is more of an accent. And you're using that full strum. Now you can use a little bit of force behind it as much as you need to get as much volume as you need rather than bringing it all the way up. But you're still bringing it up to maybe a midpoint to get that accent from your snare drum. So on this you have also accented syncopated notes. So this really challenges your technique to be able to play these various types of notes. If you can also use a nice rim shot on the downbeats if you want. It gets a little bit loud, so I don't use those. And it's also a lot easier to use the rim shots when you have this open-handed playing where you have a hi-hat on the right side and you can really get some real leverage on the stick for the accents. So it opens up with that groove, which is a very interesting kind of a funky groove, and then it goes into the B section, which has a pattern very similar to what we're talking about, left moving to right.